Hi, I've waited years to say this out loud. My name is Elyra, I'm 42, and I never thought a stranger's obituary would be the key to unraveling everything my family worked so hard to bury. It should have been just another quiet Sunday. But the moment I saw that name in the paper, everything stopped. Because that man wasn't a stranger. Not to me, and not to my father. For most of my life, I believed the narrative they handed me about who we were, what we built, and why it all mattered. But grief has a strange way of shaking loose the lies. You were never supposed to ask questions, they used to say. But I did. Before I tell you how I made them regret ever underestimating me. Like this video if you've ever sensed something wasn't quite right. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. It means more than you know. The rain hadn't stopped for hours. Outside my apartment window, droplets slid in lazy streaks down the glass, blurring the orange glow of the Seattle street lamps. Inside, the only light came from the bathroom mirror. Soft, cold, and far too honest. I adjusted my graduation cap again, as if that would make me feel something. Anything. But all I could hear was Mom's voice from last week, crisp and final. "We're sending Taryn to Europe, Elyra. Celebrate on your own." Click. End of call. End of conversation. I should have been used to it by now, being the afterthought. But this was different. This was supposed to be my night. The night I finally proved I wasn't the family disappointment. I stared at my reflection. My eyes looked too tired for 32. My smile, a little too practiced. I reached for the mascara wand, then stopped. What was the point? No one would be there to notice, except maybe Jackson. His text had come in just minutes ago. "I'll come with you if you want. You shouldn't do this alone." I read it again. Then again. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't reply. I didn't want pity. I wanted my mom. I wanted Taryn. I wanted them to care enough to show up. But instead they were boarding a plane to Paris. The silence in the apartment grew heavier. The kind of silence that presses against your ribs. I walked over to the kitchen island where my regalia lay folded, everything prepped, organized, just like me. I reached for my robe and accidentally knocked over a frame, glass shattered against tile. I froze. It was the photo from Taryn's Sweet 16, her beaming in a lavender dress, Mom standing beside her, champagne in hand, their arms linked like sisters. I wasn't in the photo. I wasn't even invited to the party. I knelt down, fingers trembling as I picked up a jagged piece of the frame. A drop of blood bloomed on my thumb. How fitting. My fingers curled tightly around the edge of the counter. The cold granite bit into my skin, but I didn't let go. I just stood there, breathing in the sterile scent of Windex and rain. I could still hear Taryn's voice from last week, all breezy and bright. "You get it, right? Paris is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. You're used to doing things solo anyway." Used to it. The way people get used to hunger, to being unseen. I walked into the bedroom and slipped into my black heels, the same ones I wore to Uncle Dorian's funeral last year. He was the only one who really saw me. The only one who ever said, "You're not like them. That's a good thing." I missed him tonight. The clock on the wall ticked over to 6:38. I still had time. The ceremony didn't start until 8, but I felt like I was already late, like I'd missed something important a long time ago, and tonight was just the final echo of that absence. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, staring at the blinking cursor in my reply to Jackson. "I'll be fine." That's what I typed. That's what I always said. I hit send. My reflection in the full-length mirror caught me again. I stood up, fixed the stole over my shoulders, and tried to smile. It didn't reach my eyes. I wondered, not for the first time, if this degree, this moment, would ever be enough. Enough to make them proud. Enough to make them look at me the way they looked at her. The sound of rain on glass softened for a second, like the sky itself was holding its breath. I turned off the lights, grabbed my umbrella, and opened the door. One deep breath. I didn't know it then, but something was about to happen, something that would change everything. The apartment felt emptier after the ceremony, not in space but in air. That kind of silence that seeps in after applause fades and no one's waiting outside to hug you. The kind of silence that mocks you with all the things that should have been said. I sat on the edge of my bed again, robe folded neatly beside me, heels kicked off by the door. I hadn't bothered to turn on any lights. Only the low, flickering blue from my phone screen lit the room. One missed call, then another, both from Mom. I didn't rush to answer the third one when it rang. I let it buzz on the comforter while I stared out the window at the street below. But then I picked it up. Not because I wanted to talk, but because some part of me still hoped maybe this time she'd say something different. Her voice came through sharp and too casual, like she hadn't missed the biggest night of my life just hours ago. "Hey, honey, just wanted to let you know Taryn's flight to Paris leaves tomorrow morning. It's a red-eye from JFK. We're flying out early to avoid delays." There was a clatter of dishes in the background, maybe a restaurant, maybe a hotel suite, and the faint, high-pitched squeal I'd recognize anywhere. Taryn's laugh. They were celebrating without me. I didn't say anything. Mom went on. "Anyway, sorry we couldn't make your thing tonight. Timing was just impossible, you know? And besides, it's just graduation. You've done that before, right?" My breath caught in my throat. Just graduation? She wasn't wrong. I had done it before. But this one mattered. This wasn't just walking across a stage. This was the start of something I'd built with my own hands. Something big. Still, I just whispered, "I understand." Because that's what I always did. Make it easier for her to leave. Taryn's voice suddenly filled the speaker, chirpy and sugar-coated. "Ellie, oh my God, Paris is going to be amazing. I'm so glad Mom made this happen. Seriously, we're doing a full spa day before the flight. You'd die. The hotel has like 10 saunas. Anyway, congrats on the degree or whatever." Or whatever. I closed my eyes and leaned back, letting my head rest against the cool plaster wall. My thumb dug into the side of the phone, a pressure point I didn't even notice I was clenching. Taryn giggled again. "Maybe next time you'll tell us sooner about these big events? Like, how are we supposed to plan anything if you keep everything secret?" Secret? I swallowed hard. "It wasn't a secret, Taryn. I sent the invitation a month ago." There was a pause. Not guilt, just inconvenience. Mom's voice cut back in, sharper this time. Maybe if you'd put more energy into being visible, like Taryn does, we'd have noticed sooner. Don't blame us for not reading the fine print in one of your techie little emails." I didn't know what stung more, the dismissal or the tone that followed, that clipped, calculated shift I'd come to recognize over the years. She wasn't just annoyed, she was interested. Because right after brushing me off, she asked, "So, tell me more about your project, the one you hinted at last Thanksgiving. The AI thing?" I blinked. That Thanksgiving I had barely said a word. Taryn had monopolized the conversation with her influencer deals and perfume sponsorships, but at one point I had mentioned I was working on something big. Mom had nodded distractedly while passing the cranberry sauce. Now, suddenly, she remembered? My voice felt thin in my throat. "It's complicated, still under wraps." "Right," she said. Then too quickly, "But you're not doing it all alone, right? You've got partners, I hope." There it was, not concern, not pride, just calculation. A slow pit opened in my chest. Why now? Why the sudden interest? She hadn't asked about my work in years, not when I got the grant, not when I filed the provisional patents. But the moment the dean had said my name on stage, the moment tech innovator hit her ears, she'd remembered. I rubbed my temples with one hand, the other still holding the phone like it might burn me. Mom was still talking, but her voice felt like white noise, something about venture capital and smart investments. I tuned out. I was back in that moment at Uncle Dorian's wake, when she told me I should have dropped my work to help with the funeral arrangements, while Taryn went shopping for a black dress. My grip tightened. "I'm tired, Mom," I finally said. "We can talk later." "Suit yourself," she replied, not missing a beat. "Just don't be surprised when people start asking questions. You know the industry. If you're not ahead, you're prey." Then she hung up. I stared at the screen. My reflection looked ghostly in the dark glass. I didn't move, didn't speak. I just sat there, hands trembling. She hadn't called to apologize. She hadn't even called to congratulate me. She had called to see what she could extract. I stood up slowly, legs stiff from sitting too long in tension. My shoulders ached. I walked to the sink, splashed cold water on my face, let it drip down my neck. The air smelled faintly of rain again, drifting in through the cracked window. In that moment, a quiet certainty settled inside me. She wasn't proud of me. She was watching me. No, she was planning something. And for the first time in years, I felt it in my gut, that same twist I'd ignored too many times before. Mom's interest wasn't motherly. It was strategic. She'd seen the headlines. She'd heard the dean. She knew something was coming. I looked down at my phone. The screen was blank now, quiet. But it didn't feel like the end of a conversation. It felt like the start of a war. It started with a dream, or maybe a memory. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. Uncle Dorian sat hunched over his cluttered workbench, magnifier clipped to his glasses, muttering softly as the soldering iron hissed beside him. The room always smelled like metal and lemon oil, warm, sharp, familiar. His fingers were stained with ink and heat, but his touch was careful when he handed me a tangle of wires. "There's a legacy in here, Elle," he whispered, "but only if you're ready for it." I blinked awake to the buzz of the front door intercom. The room was still dark. Seattle's morning light had barely cut through the fog. I stumbled to the monitor, heart still half tangled in the dream. A courier stood in the lobby, holding a small padded envelope. No return address. I signed for it with fingers that felt oddly cold. The envelope was light, too light. Inside was a small black USB drive and a note in shaky penmanship. "For Elyra, when the time comes." My breath hitched. Dorian had been gone for almost a year. Stroke, sudden, no warnings. I hadn't even gotten to say goodbye. At the funeral, Mom barely mentioned him, too busy complaining about the drive to Portland and how the whole thing was eccentric, just like him. But now, this. I sat on the couch and held the USB between my fingers. Its surface was smooth, matte, but the weight of it felt heavier than plastic. I turned it over. No labels, no markings. Only Dorian would send a cryptic gift from the grave, and only I would be foolish enough to plug it in. I slid my laptop onto my lap, opened a secure sandbox environment, and held my breath as I inserted the drive. The screen blinked once, then again, then everything went dark. For a second, I thought the system crashed, but then lines of code began crawling across the screen. Not random, structured, recursive, layered in encryption. Familiar, yet not mine. It was his. His handwriting in code, the indentation, the quirks in naming conventions, the rhythmic way his logic flowed. I recognized it like you recognize an old friend's laugh. The window expanded. A header flashed briefly. Project Elyra 4, Dorian E. Kane. Eyes only. My heart thudded. I hadn't seen that project name since I was 16. He used to joke that one day I'd outbuild him, outthink him, that I had the spark. He was the only one who ever said it like it was fact, not flattery. I scrolled further. There were schematics, AI infrastructure frameworks, architectural notes, and something that looked suspiciously like the early skeleton of the neural logic I'd used in my current platform. But how? I had built my system from scratch, or so I thought. The DNA of it was mine. But now, staring at this, I saw the fingerprints of someone who had laid the foundation long before I even knew what I was building. Was I building his idea all along? I leaned back, breath catching. My fingers itched with questions. Why send this now? Why keep it hidden? A new file auto-loaded. Audio, 03.wav. I hesitated, then clicked play. His voice cracked through the tinny laptop speaker, slower, older, but unmistakably him. "If you're hearing this, Elle, then you've reached the threshold. That point where truth matters more than comfort. What I left you wasn't an accident. You built something powerful, and that power is going to attract attention you're not ready for." I felt a chill race down my arms. He paused, coughed, then said, "You think they ignored you because they didn't see your worth. That's only half true. Some of them, especially your mother, saw too much." My chest tightened. He knew. He knew what Mom was. His voice turned soft, like he was speaking across time. "Trust your instincts. They'll try to take it. They always do." The file cut off. No goodbye, no signature, just silence. I sat frozen. Had he seen this coming? The interest in my work, the sudden shift in Mom's tone, the way she pressed about my partnerships? 100 moments replayed at once. Mom pressuring me to take a break from school that semester. Uncle Dorian and I were working on AI modules. Her insisting that I give Taryn a copy of my senior project, just to see if she gets it. She had always been watching, not blind, calculating. And now, this drive. I spent hours poring over the data. Every file led to more questions. Hidden encryption keys, obscure references to joint patents I'd never seen. There was a list of names, some I recognized from old MIT conferences, others, strangers. One name was underlined 3 times, E. Maricela Kane. I closed the laptop slowly. Outside, the fog had thickened, the sky a pale gray that swallowed the sun. I wrapped my fingers around the drive again. It felt colder than before. Something in me cracked a little, not from fear, but from the weight of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. Grief. Not just for Dorian, but for the version of me that still thought family could be trusted. I walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and held it without drinking. The condensation trailed down my hand like it was trying to map my pulse. I knew what I had to do, but I didn't know who to trust. Not anymore. Not Mom, not Taryn, not even myself. Not entirely. Because if I had built something on top of a legacy I never fully understood, who did it really belong to? And what would they do to take it? The drive was still warm in my palm as I slid it back into the envelope and tucked it into the back of the freezer, behind a bag of peas I hadn't opened in months. It felt childish, pointless, but I didn't want it near my machines anymore. I stood there in the kitchen, listening to the hum of the fridge, the faint buzz of the city waking up outside, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. Not in a comforting way, in a watched way. The University of Washington campus was buzzing, but I moved through it like a shadow. The sky above was a soft, overcast gray, classic Seattle, the kind of light that made everything feel suspended in time. As I stepped out of the car, the fabric of my gown fluttered against my legs, catching on the wind. I clutched the folds tighter. Jackson gave me a small nod from the sidewalk. He was already waiting, hands in the pockets of his charcoal suit, tie slightly crooked in the way that said he hadn't cared much when putting it on, but still showed up. Always showed up. I forced a smile. "Thanks for being here." He just shrugged. "Wouldn't miss it. They should have given you the stadium, not just the stage." I wanted to laugh, but it caught in my throat. My fingers curled tighter around the program in my hand. I didn't want to talk about them. Not today. We moved with the stream of other graduates, faces half lit by pride and nerves, families calling out names and waving cameras. But mine was just a silence that echoed louder than applause ever could. Inside the auditorium, the lights were dimmed just enough to make the stage feel sacred, the way it should have felt. The scent of fresh-cut flowers, waxed floors, and anticipation all tangled together in the air. Rows of chairs filled fast. I scanned the crowd once, then twice. Nothing. No familiar silhouettes, no flashes of red hair, no clinking jewelry or floral perfume. They were still in Paris, probably sipping champagne in some rooftop bar. A lump built in my throat, slow and stubborn. I took my seat in the 3rd row, adjusting my cap. Someone nearby whispered about their parents flying in from Boston. Someone else was FaceTiming their brother from Italy. I smiled politely when our eyes met, then looked away. I didn't want their joy to highlight my vacancy. Minutes passed. A speaker took the podium, then another. They praised innovation, grit, and the underdog spirit. It should have made me proud. Instead, I felt like a ghost sitting in my own celebration. The dean stepped forward. His voice boomed across the auditorium, calm and practiced. He congratulated the graduating class, spoke of resilience in an age of disruption, nodded toward the next generation of tech pioneers. I stared straight ahead. Then my phone buzzed. Once. I flinched. It was a notification. Taryn posted a new story. Against my better judgment, I tapped it. They were in a Parisian boutique surrounded by velvet handbags and mirror walls. Mom sipped a mimosa. Taryn twirled for the camera in some designer coat. In the caption, "To new adventures." "Sorry, sis, couldn't wait." My stomach clenched. I should have turned off my phone. I should have been used to this. But somehow it still hurt, still felt personal. The dean's voice shifted then. A pause, the kind that made people lean in. Before we continue, we'd like to recognize a graduate whose work has quietly reshaped the AI landscape over the past 2 years. I blinked. An innovator whose research has secured over a dozen provisional patents and attracted attention from multiple Fortune 500s. Please hold your applause until the end. We're about to show you something special. My heartbeat stuttered. On the massive screen behind him, a video flickered to life. My interface, the algorithm I'd been refining in silence, the neural behavior prediction model that had started as scribbles in my dorm room and grown into something bigger than me. My hands started to sweat. I glanced at Jackson. His expression was unreadable, but he gave the smallest nod. He knew. He'd known this would happen. He helped make it happen. The dean turned to the screen. This work, codenamed K2, is projected to revolutionize behavioral AI, and behind it stands a name you may not have heard before, but you will. My mouth went dry. Elyra Kane, stand up. I stood slowly. Applause erupted like a wave breaking against rocks. Loud, chaotic, unrelenting. Faces turned toward me. Cameras clicked. Hands clapped. But I wasn't looking at them. I was still looking for my family. The empty seat beside Jackson mocked me. They weren't here. They never would be. I forced a smile as the lights warmed my face. A spotlight cut through the auditorium, casting a glow that somehow made me feel more alone than the darkness ever could. In that moment, pride and pain braided tightly inside me. I'd done it. I'd crossed a finish line they never believed I'd reach, and I had done it alone. But I didn't cry. Instead, I breathed in slowly, grounding myself in the applause, not for the noise, but for what it meant. They knew now. The world knew. And soon, so would my family. The dean leaned toward the mic one last time. But this is just the beginning. I didn't know what he meant by that. Not yet. But I felt something shift. The air was thicker, my chest tighter. I stepped off the stage, diploma in hand, as whispers followed me. They weren't done with me. And neither was this story. The applause still echoed in my ears long after I stepped off that stage, but it wasn't the kind of sound that lingered as comfort. It clung to me like static, buzzing, disorienting, unreal. I clutched the rolled diploma in one hand, my palm damp against the ribbon. Somewhere in the background, a jazz quartet played something soft, almost out of tune, but I couldn't focus on anything except the heat rising in my cheeks. The auditorium lights dimmed again, and I slipped behind a curtain into the makeshift green room the university had set up for speakers. It smelled like dust and old wood polish. Jackson was already there, crouched near a monitor, watching the replay. My name was still on the screen. "They're gonna know now," he said without turning around. I didn't respond. I was too busy trying to breathe. All these years spent coding in silence, second-guessing every line, every decision. And now the world knew, or at least the ones who mattered, and the ones who didn't. I peeled off the graduation cap. My scalp tingled. The elastic had left a shallow groove on my forehead, like a mark I hadn't noticed until now. "We should go," I whispered. My voice sounded distant, like someone else had spoken it. But before we could leave, my phone vibrated. Video call. I didn't need to check the name. Only one person would be so bold. I hesitated, then answered. "Elyra," Mom's voice purred, coated in artificial warmth. The screen shook as she adjusted her angle. She was in a car, leather seats, gold earrings catching the light, Taryn beside her, half turned toward the window, her expression unreadable. "We just saw the announcement," Mom continued. "The dean's speech, the video. That was impressive." Her voice faltered on that last word. I could hear it. Not awe, calculation. "You didn't tell us you were doing anything on that scale," she added. 15 billion? Is that a typo?" Taryn finally looked into the camera, her brows drawn in a tight line. "That's real?" I said nothing. "Your little friend, what's his name, Jackson? He just flashed your logo on the live stream like it was some Marvel reveal." Mom laughed, but there was no joy in it. "You built a company and kept it from us?" There it was. Not pride, not even anger. Ownership. I swallowed, the back of my throat burning. "You said celebrate on your own." My voice was quiet but steady. Mom narrowed her eyes. "That was before we knew what you were sitting on." I flinched. Jackson shifted beside me, his eyes locked on the phone screen. but he didn't say a word. "Elyra," Mom continued, her tone dropping, "do you even understand the kind of attention this brings? You can't do this without guidance, without protection." I felt my stomach twist. "From you?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "From people who know how the world works." Taryn's voice slipped in then, softer. "You could have said something. We're family." I met her gaze, the glass screen between us suddenly feeling thinner than it ever had. "You didn't want family. You wanted someone to clap from the sidelines." The silence that followed was sharp and long. Then Jackson stepped forward, slowly raising his phone. On the screen behind him, our website, the logo shining beneath a bold header, K2 Labs, redefining human possibility. "She doesn't need protection," he said calmly. "She built the storm." Mom's lips parted slightly, her composure slipping for just a second. "And what do you get out of this?" she snapped. "You her boyfriend now?" Jackson didn't flinch. "I'm her partner." He glanced at me. "In business, in loyalty, something you wouldn't recognize." I almost dropped the phone. Taryn stood abruptly, pushing the camera out of frame. Mom didn't blink. "We'll be in touch," she said coldly, before the screen went black. I stared at my reflection in the darkened screen, my face pale, eyes wide, mascara smudged at the corner. I looked like a stranger. But I wasn't one anymore. They had seen it now, not just my name, but what I'd built. The weight of it, the reach, the value. They couldn't unsee it. I slid the phone into my pocket and walked toward the back doors of the auditorium. Outside, the sun had started to set behind the university towers, casting long shadows across the courtyard. A soft breeze lifted the edges of my robe. I pulled it tighter. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was watched. Jackson walked beside me in silence. At the edge of the campus, he paused and said, "They're going to come after it, you know." "I know. What are you going to do?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked up at the soft streaks of pink and gold across the evening sky, the kind of sky that looked peaceful even when everything underneath it was breaking apart. "I'm going to protect it," I said, "and I'm going to find out how much they already know. Because if they were this shaken by a live stream, what would they do when they realized I hadn't shown them everything?" The next time I saw her, it wasn't on a screen. It was real. The heat of her perfume, the click of her heels, the way she always entered a space like she owned it, even if she didn't. Especially if she didn't. I was still in Seattle, sitting in the hotel cafe 2 days after the ceremony. It was early morning, the kind of quiet that only exists before cities remember to be loud again. A half-empty cappuccino cooled in front of me, steam long gone. I stirred it with a spoon out of habit, not even tasting it. That's when I heard her voice. "Elyra." I didn't look up right away. My fingers froze mid-stir, metal scraping ceramic just once before I set it down. I lifted my eyes slowly, already bracing. She looked rehearsed. Hair curled, makeup light, blazer crisp. Navy, not black, like she wanted to seem composed but not funereal. Like this wasn't a confrontation but a chat. Her smile was the same one she wore at galas, fundraisers, networking events, the one that always made me feel like a spectator in my own family. "You look tired," she said, sliding into the seat across from me without asking. "I wonder why," I murmured, folding my arms. She exhaled through her nose like I was already exhausting her. "Let's not start like that. I'm here because I care." That sentence landed like an insult. I didn't reply. I just looked at her. Really looked, searching for anything sincere behind her eyes. But they were too sharp, too focused. She didn't come here for closure. She came for leverage. "You should have told us," she said, "what you were working on, the scope of it, the value." There it was, the hesitation on the word value, not brilliance, not meaning, just price tag. "And you would have done what? Help me?" She didn't blink. "Managed it, protected it." "Like you protected Dad's pension?" A flicker, barely there, but I saw it, a twitch at the edge of her mouth. Her posture straightened. She didn't like being reminded of that. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, sleek, monogrammed. "I've been talking with someone who might be able to help position K2 for broader acquisition. We're not just talking investment. I mean full-scale integration into legacy networks. Insurance, retail, defense." I stared at the folder but didn't touch it. "So, that's why you came, not to congratulate me, Not to apologize. You came with a sales pitch." Her smile finally dropped. "You don't know what you're playing with, Elyra. You built something powerful, yes, but unprotected. The wrong hands will eat you alive. I've been through this. I know how people think." I leaned forward slightly, voice low. "And what makes you think I want you anywhere near it?" She met my gaze head on. "Because I've already been near it." The air shifted. I blinked. "What? You think Taryn was just curious? Just tagging along while you built your little empire?" I felt my stomach tighten. "You told her to spy on me." She didn't deny it. "I needed to know what you were doing. You were disappearing for months at a time, refusing to share drafts, hiding your laptop like it was state secrets. That's not how family works." "That's exactly how this family works," I snapped. "You only show up when there's something to take." She didn't flinch. "You built your business in secret. I did what I had to do. I thought if I could understand what you were creating, maybe I could help. Maybe I could position it. Before it was too late." "Too late for what?" She didn't answer right away. She reached for the folder again and pushed it toward me. "They're already circling," she said. "You don't know the half of it. Investors, competitors, people from Dad's old network. This goes deeper than just a product. It touches legacy tech, defense contracts, strategic patents, foundations your uncle never disclosed in his will. Dorian kept things from you. And now they're resurfacing." My fingers curled tightly around the edge of the table. "You used Taryn." "I protected her," she shot back. "You were too obsessed with outshining everyone to notice what you were dragging her into. She made her own choices. She's your sister." I stood, the chair scraping loudly against the tile. "And I'm your daughter," I said, my voice shaking. "But that never stopped you from choosing power over me." The silence between us was thick, taut. She looked up at me, the pretense finally slipping. "Just think about what's at stake," she said. "I'm not the enemy here." But she was. Not because she wanted control, because she thought she deserved it. I turned to leave, heart thudding in my chest. As I walked out into the crisp morning air, the sun just beginning to burn through the fog, I felt her words echo behind me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I didn't cry, not this time. But her laughter, faint and clipped, followed me out the door, and something in it chilled me. The message came at 1:12 a.m. I was half awake, scrolling mindlessly through emails and press coverage, my body exhausted but my mind wired. I'd been pacing the apartment in socks, lights dimmed, listening to the occasional hiss of rain against the windows. The city was quiet, and I hated that kind of quiet, the kind that made every thought sound louder in my head. The screen lit up. "Incoming call, Taryn." I stared at it, thumb hovering. Then I answered. There was a pause, long enough that I almost thought she'd changed her mind. "Hey," she said finally, her voice low. "Are you alone?" Her tone cracked on the last word. I sat down slowly on the arm of the couch, feeling the air shift. "Yes." Another pause. Then a sound I hadn't heard in years, Taryn crying. Not the kind of tears she used to fake for attention or dramatics. These were stifled, uneven, real. "I messed up," she whispered. My stomach sank. She kept going, words tumbling out like she couldn't hold them back anymore. "I told Mom about the code, the structure. I thought she just wanted to understand it. I didn't know she'd—" She stopped herself, like finishing the sentence would make it permanent. I didn't breathe. "She stole it?" Taryn didn't answer, but she didn't deny it either. My fingers dug into the cushion beneath me. "Taryn, what exactly did you give her?" "Only fragments, the back-end flow, some logic sequences. She said it was just for clarity, like, so she could help you get real funding." I stood and walked toward the window, needing something to anchor me. The city lights below blurred through rain-streaked glass. "How long has she had it?" "A few weeks." My breath caught. That timeline aligned exactly with when the pitch from a rival firm had surfaced, one that mirrored the same neural logic as K2. I'd brushed it off as coincidence. It wasn't. "She already pitched it," I said aloud, more to myself than to her. Taryn's silence was confirmation. A wave of heat spread through my chest. Not anger, grief, the kind of grief that comes when a piece of you, the part that still believed in someone, gets carved out. "I didn't think she'd do it without telling you," Taryn murmured. "I didn't think she'd—" You didn't think, I snapped, voice shaking. You just followed orders, like always. That's not fair, isn't it? The line went quiet again. A memory rose before I could push it back. Taryn at 17, bragging at Thanksgiving dinner about her internship with a fashion label, while Mom doted and beamed. I'd just finished a research paper on predictive modeling and tried to share it. Mom's response? Let's not bore everyone with tech talk, Elyra. Taryn had laughed. Even now I could hear the echo. You could have asked me, I said, voice flat. You could have believed in me for once. I did, she whispered. I do. I was scared. You always seemed 10 steps ahead, like you didn't need anyone. I let the words hang between us. Then she said the part I knew was coming. I think she's going to sell it, the whole model. She's already in contact with a buyer. My pulse thudded in my ears. Who? I don't know, but she told them it was hers, that Dorian gave it to her in the will. A beat. She said you were just a technician, that she held the legacy. I closed my eyes. That phrase, held the legacy. Something Dorian once said, but never to her, only to me. I opened my laptop and scanned my logs. There it was, an external ping on our sandbox server from an IP flagged under an anonymous proxy, traced to a firm in Zurich. Encryption layered like armor. They were already inside. I'll fix this, I said aloud, more to myself than to Taryn. But we're done. Elyra, you don't get to be sorry when it costs me everything. I ended the call. I stood there in the dark, phone still in my hand, pulse thudding behind my eyes. Jackson called 2 minutes later. I just got an alert, he said. Unauthorized access attempt on the failover node. Someone's fishing around the secondary architecture, not a brute force. This is internal logic. Taryn gave them pieces, I said. That's how they're bypassing our decoys. He swore under his breath. We need to shut it down. Now. I nodded, already moving to the server room in my apartment. But then he asked the question I'd been dreading. Can she still access anything? I hesitated. I hadn't revoked Taryn's temp credentials. Part of me had forgotten she ever had them. That part of me, the hopeful part, was dead now. I'll lock her out. I sat at the terminal, fingers flying over the keyboard. Lines of code, blocks of logic, access keys buried in fragments of my old life. I moved fast, faster than I ever had, but not fast enough to stop the dread from creeping in, because if they had this much already, what else had I overlooked? There's a specific kind of silence that comes after betrayal, not the sharp, dramatic kind, the dull, sticky kind. It sits in your chest like damp wool, heavy and hard to shake. That's what filled the air the next morning. I hadn't slept. The server breach reports were still running, automated alerts pinging from 3 different secure channels. We'd locked down everything, rebuilt access hierarchies, rerouted APIs through emergency back-end vaults, and pulled K2 offline from every testbed but one. But even with every defense up, I didn't feel safe. The knock came around 9 a.m. I flinched. No one ever knocked on my door without texting first. I opened it a crack. A delivery guy stood there, young, hoodie damp from the drizzle, holding a small envelope, ivory, sealed with red wax. No name on it, he said. Paid in cash. I took it slowly, nodding, and closed the door before he turned away. My hands were already shaking. Inside, a letter on cream paper, written in sharp ink. Your technology reflects more than brilliance. It reflects legacy. Your uncle's vision lives on, and some of us still remember his promises. We believe it's time to talk. V. There was no return address, just a watermark I barely noticed at first. Faint, embedded near the bottom corner. An old logo. I recognized it. One of Dorian's archive diagrams had that symbol sketched in the margin. I pulled up the file, scanning through the mess of annotations and crossouts. Then I saw it. Same symbol, same structure. He'd hidden pieces of K2's logic in plain sight, decades ago, before I even knew what AI meant. This wasn't just his legacy I'd been building. It was part of something bigger. I leaned back slowly, the weight of it crashing over me. How long had they been watching? And who the hell was V? I didn't get far before my phone buzzed again. This time, an email. Subject: claim of prior IP ownership, formal notice. I froze. The sender was masked, but the language was precise, Legal. Chilling. They were alleging partial ownership of my core algorithm, citing overlapping conceptual design traced to a set of documents from Dorian's early partnerships. Buried deep in a line of code, a metadata tag I'd missed. His old signature, and now someone else was claiming they had a stake. If you attempt to commercialize or transfer K2, the message read, we reserve the right to seek legal remedy. I read it 3 times before moving. Then I called Jackson. He picked up immediately. I saw the alert. You okay? I just got a formal claim. Someone's trying to assert legacy ownership through Dorian. Damn it, he muttered. It's too coordinated. They're not guessing. They know. I sat down at my desk, staring at the printed letter again. The wax seal, the impossible precision of it all. You think V is real? I asked. Not just some persona? If they had access to Dorian's archived logs before us, they've been preparing longer than we have. This isn't random. I let silence answer. Then something flickered in my mind, a memory I hadn't thought about in years. Back when I was 16, Dorian had taken me to a lab, not his garage, not a university, somewhere discreet downtown, a gray building with no signage. Inside, sleek equipment, soft lighting. He introduced me to a man he called Victor. Not Uncle Victor or Mr. anything, just Victor. They spoke in code, about patterns, about future-proofing. Back then I thought it was just a fancy nickname for a project. But now, it snapped into place. Jackson, I said slowly. I think V might be someone Dorian worked with. A real person, not just legal leverage. That complicates things. No, it clarifies them. I stood, pacing the narrow stretch between my desk and the window. My pulse beat behind my eyes. If this V person was a co-developer, even unofficially, he might have some legal claim. But he's using anonymity to spook us, instead of coming forward publicly. Why stay in the shadows unless he's hiding something? Exactly. I looked again at the wax seal, the handwriting. Too deliberate. Too performative. He wants something, I said, but not money. Not yet. Then what? Control, a seat at the table, or maybe access to something even Dorian didn't leave behind. I didn't say it out loud, but I felt it. This wasn't just about K2. It was about whatever came after K2, the next phase Dorian never got to finish. The buzz of my phone cut through the air again. Another alert. Someone was outside my office door. A shadow moved across the hallway monitor. Slow, intentional. I walked toward the door and checked the peephole. Empty. I opened it a sliver. On the ground, a second envelope. Same wax, same paper. But this time, one word was handwritten across the front. Soon. I stepped back, hands still on the knob. For the first time in this entire nightmare, more than my mother's manipulation, more than Taryn's betrayal, I felt real fear. Because this wasn't just a family war anymore. This was something else. And whoever V was, he was already inside the walls. I didn't sleep that night. The second envelope still sat unopened on my kitchen counter, the wax seal unbroken. The word soon taunted me in looping, deliberate ink. It felt less like a warning and more like a promise. By morning, I'd made my decision. If I wanted answers, I couldn't wait for them to come knocking again. I had to go back to Portland, back to her. The drive south was gray and relentless, the kind of drive where the clouds hang low and the road feels like it's pulling you through a tunnel of ghosts. Each mile marked another layer I had to peel off. Old memories, old silences, the kind of hurt that doesn't bleed, just festers. Her house hadn't changed. Still the same 2 big windows and perfect hedges. Still the same slate blue paint job like it was trying too hard to be understated. I parked at the curb and stared at the front door for a long time before getting out. My fingers were already cold when I rang the bell. She answered faster than I expected, as if she'd been standing just behind it, waiting. Her expression didn't register surprise, just that same polished mask. But I saw something flicker beneath it. "Elyra," she said, stepping back to let me in. "I was wondering when you'd come." The inside was too clean, too still. No music, no scent of coffee or candles, just quiet. I walked in slowly, my heels clicking against the hardwood floors like punctuation marks. "I got a letter," I said, From someone calling himself V. She didn't blink. Then you already know what this is. I turned to face her. No, I know what it's not. This isn't about legacy or protecting Dorian's work. This is about control. She crossed her arms. Her bracelet clinked against her watch, the sound sharp in the silence. Control? She repeated, voice soft. Sweetheart, you were never out of control. You were just misguided. That word hit like a slap. You stole my code. You manipulated Taryn. You sold a piece of something you didn't even understand. I did what I had to do to keep this family afloat. My voice rose. There is no this family, Mom. Not when every move you've made was transactional. The mask cracked, just for a second. You think I wanted to become this? She hissed. You think I enjoyed watching Dorian coddle you like you were the next Messiah while I worked every connection, every favor to keep this house standing? I stepped closer. You didn't protect me. You saw me as a resource, just like you did with him. Her eyes narrowed. And what have you become, Elyra? A lone genius with no one to answer to? You think that's strength? It's survival. She walked past me into the kitchen, as if she couldn't bear to look at me anymore. They're not going to stop, you know, she said quietly. V's not alone. There are others. People who've been circling since before Dorian died. Then tell me the truth, I said, following her. Who is he? She paused, hand resting on the edge of the granite counter. He was Dorian's partner, she said finally. Once, a long time ago, they split when the ethics started to shift. Dorian wanted open access, transparency. V wanted control, licensing, government contracts. When Dorian cut him off, things turned. Turned how? He threatened to expose him, claimed Dorian stole part of the early neural framework. It never made it to court. But Dorian buried the code, literally hid it. In archives, notebooks, his will, thought if he fragmented it enough, no one would ever be able to claim it. I stared at her. And now he's claiming I inherited it. She turned toward me, arms crossed. He's not wrong. I blinked. Excuse me? You're sitting on something worth billions. More than that. Influence. Predictive models this accurate? They could shape elections, rewrite warfare, collapse markets. You think this is still just a personal project? Her words were too calm, too rehearsed. You didn't just inherit Dorian's brilliance, she continued. You inherited his enemies. The room spun slightly. I braced my hand against the island. Everything I'd built, everything I thought was mine, was stitched together from a past I didn't fully understand. And now it was being used as a weapon in a war I never signed up for. He sent another envelope, I said quietly. This one just said soon. Her eyes darkened. Then you don't have much time. I straightened. I need the original contracts. Anything Dorian left, the will, the lab notes. I want everything. She didn't argue. She just nodded slowly and walked down the hallway. I waited in the stillness, heart hammering. The kitchen lights hummed faintly, the fridge clicking on in the background like static. When she returned, she handed me a small lockbox. It's all in here, she said, but it won't protect you. I took the box and turned to leave. But at the door, I paused. You never really loved me, did you? She didn't answer, didn't have to. I walked out into the Portland rain with a box full of secrets and the taste of truth like rust on my tongue. I didn't know what I'd find inside that box. But something told me it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The lockbox sat in my passenger seat all the way back to Seattle like it was radiating heat. I didn't open it during the drive. I couldn't. Every time I looked at it, my fingers curled with both fear and anticipation, like I was about to read the last page of a book that might break something inside me forever. I waited until I got home. Waited until the sky was dark again, until the rain started tapping against the windows like it was trying to pull me out of the moment. I sat at my kitchen table, the lights low, the silence broken only by the soft mechanical hum of my server rack breathing in the next room. I turned the key. Inside, papers, dozens of them, folders labeled in Dorian's scrawl, and one thick manila envelope marked, "Read first." My throat tightened. I pulled it out with both hands, peeled the flap open, and found a legal letter on embossed letterhead, his attorney's office. It was dated just 3 months before Dorian died. The first line stopped me cold. As stipulated in the codicil to the will of Dorian Everett Kane, if and only if the K2 construct becomes operational and publicized, this clause shall take effect. I blinked. I kept reading. All intellectual property, patents, and proprietary assets affiliated with the project known as K2 or any of its derivative or legacy frameworks are hereby bequeathed to Ms. Elyra Kane, provided she demonstrates proof of independent implementation without collaboration from any outside firm, partner, or corporate body bearing a claim to Dorian E. Kane's prior work. My hand shook. In such case, all prior claims, including but not limited to V, the partnership network known as Black Ridge Consortium, and immediate family members, are to be considered disqualified from receiving benefit under Dorian Kane's estate. I sank back in the chair. I wasn't just his heir. I was his contingency plan. He knew what was coming, knew they'd come for it. For me, and he built a legal firewall that locked them out unless I proved myself alone. And I had. The letter included one more sheet, a signed statement from Dorian, handwritten, scanned, notarized. Elyra was the only one who didn't ask for a shortcut. That's why she's the one I trust to finish what I started. I couldn't breathe for a second. My hands covered my mouth. I just sat there, stunned, the weight of everything pressing down and lifting at once. It was vindication, but it was also grief, raw and blooming in my chest like fire. He believed in me. He'd always believed in me. I didn't know how long I stayed there, staring at his signature, feeling the space between us collapse for a moment. But the high didn't last, because underneath the letter, stapled to the will, was a set of names. A list. 5 names, all tied to something called Phase 2. I didn't recognize most of them, but the last one was burned into my brain. Victor Harlan, the man Dorian once introduced to me simply as Victor. The same man I now suspected was V. He wasn't just some rival, he was a co-architect of what came next. Phase 2 wasn't theoretical, it was already in motion. And if he was trying this hard to take K2 away from me, it meant he wasn't after the past. He was after the future. My laptop chimed. An encrypted file transfer pinged, flagged from our security log. Jackson had sent it from his side of the vault. I opened it. Inside was a screen recording from an offshore cyber forum. A new project listed for private investment, Orion, a behavioral AI platform promising second-generation logic modeling, one that suspiciously mirrored K2's design. But the contact email? Anonymous. The signature? Just a letter, V. I called Jackson. "They're not stealing K2, I said as soon as he answered. They're leapfrogging it, using what they got from Terran to accelerate the next model. Orion isn't just a clone, it's the next step." He didn't speak for a long moment. "What do we do?" he asked finally. I looked at the will, at Dorian's words. "We go public, fast, file the patents, secure the legal claim before they move, and then..." I paused. "We finish Phase 2 before they do." Jackson exhaled. "You're going to need backing. This won't be a quiet fight." "I don't need quiet," I said. "I need proof, and now I have it." He nodded through the line. "Then I'm with you." The call ended. I sat there, staring at the list of names again. The third one down was circled. Underneath it, written in Dorian's slanted hand, "If anything happens to me, start with her." I read the name again. A woman I'd never met, but if Dorian trusted her, I had to find her, because someone out there held the last piece. And if I didn't get to it first, V would. The first thing I did was call the lawyer. By noon the next day, the patent filings were in motion. My ownership of K2 was officially recorded, and Dorian's codicil had been notarized into every digital vault I could get my hands on. It wouldn't stop V completely, but it drew a legal boundary in the sand, one he couldn't cross without leaving footprints. But this wasn't just about defense anymore. It was about building forward. We launched the Dorian Foundation that afternoon, quietly, intentionally, under the radar. Jackson handled the incorporation, and I wrote the mission myself, to fund creators building without permission, innovators overlooked, outsiders, my people, and maybe, finally, my future. The press picked it up faster than I expected. Within 24 hours, I had 3 inboxes full of inquiries, pitch decks, and desperate pleas from engineers who sounded like I once did, buried in brilliance no one else cared to see. I should have felt victorious, but I didn't. Not yet, because something still lingered, a loose thread in all of this. The woman Dorian circled on the Phase 2 list. Her name was Geneva Mallory. I'd never met her, never heard of her. But Jackson had tracked down a digital signature matching one of her archived logins from the old university servers. Buried in a faculty directory at MIT, a quiet footnote, long retired, no public LinkedIn. She had vanished, but not without a trace. I sent the email on a whim, not expecting an answer. She responded 20 minutes later. Subject line, I was waiting. I flew out that evening. She lived on the outskirts of Boulder, Colorado, a cabin nestled in the foothills. Crisp pine air, the scent of wood smoke, the quiet kind of snow that hadn't started falling yet but made you feel like it might. I half expected her not to answer the door, but she did. Older than I imagined, late 60s maybe, silver braid down one shoulder. Her eyes, sharp, cautious, didn't look surprised to see me. Come in, Elyra. She'd made tea, chamomile, a single cup already poured. She didn't ask how I found her. She didn't need to. Dorian always knew you'd come, she said, sitting across from me by the fire. I stared at her for a long moment. Were you part of Phase 2? She nodded. In the beginning. We were building predictive ethics layers, emotional weighting, self-moderation protocols, not for control, for balance. We wanted AIs that understood restraint, reflection, the kind that questioned themselves. And V? Her gaze hardened. He wanted something else, application, compliance modeling, AI that would enforce morality based on authority, not inquiry. And Dorian stopped him? Too late. By then, V had already ported a skeleton of the core logic into a military development firm. Dorian scrubbed the back end, fragmented the code, scattered the team. I disappeared. I let her words settle in the room like ash. He left me the will, I said. But V is already trying to leap past K2. He's building a successor, Orion. Geneva didn't blink. Then he's ahead of schedule. I stiffened. What do you mean? She set her tea down slowly. There's a prototype. Dorian never told anyone except me. The true final version, the one that could recalibrate itself across value systems. It was codenamed Lyra, your namesake. He built it around your architecture years before you even touched a keyboard. I stared at her. Something in my chest cracked open. You're saying he saw this coming? Not the players, but the tension, legacy versus power, trust versus ownership. You were always going to be the bridge. Tears prickled at the edge of my eyes, but I blinked them back. Where is it? Geneva stood and walked to the bookshelf, pulling down a leather binder. Inside, coordinates, logs, a single flash drive sealed in anti-static foil. It's yours now, but you have to decide. Does it go public or stay in your hands? I took the drive like it was something alive. Outside, the wind picked up. Tree branches whispered against the windows like they were warning me. V doesn't know this exists? I asked. No, but he's watching you, and he's already waiting for your next move. I nodded. I knew what I had to do, but before I left, I asked one more question. Why did he name it after me? Geneva smiled softly. Because even back then, you were the only one who asked questions without needing permission. I flew home in silence, clutching the flash drive in my coat pocket like it was something sacred. When I landed, there was a voicemail from Taryn. Her voice trembled. Mom's been trying to reach you. Something happened. You need to come back. They're not who you think they are. I didn't listen to the rest, because in the middle of the living room, on the floor beneath my door, was another envelope. No wax this time. Just one word, scribbled in ink that had begun to smudge. Ready? I held the envelope in my hands for a long time before opening it. There was no seal this time, no wax, no flourish. Just the word ready, scrawled in ink that had bled slightly from moisture, like it had been left there too long. I tore it open. Inside, a plane ticket, one way, to Geneva, and a note. If you want to know what this was really about, come see me. No signature, but it didn't need one. It was V. I didn't tell Jackson, not right away. I didn't want him trying to talk me out of it. I packed light, took only the flash drive Geneva had given me, and the binder Dorian left behind. I needed to see how deep the roots went, not for revenge anymore, but for clarity, closure. The flight was quiet, uneasy. I watched the sky shift from sunrise to midday over the Atlantic and tried not to think about what I'd say when I saw him. The address led me to a private facility just outside the city. Glass and concrete nestled against a cliffside forest, humming with electricity and surveillance. I told the gate attendant my name. He waved me through without a word. They'd been expecting me. A woman in a gray suit met me at the front. No badge, no name tag. "He's waiting," she said. I followed her through a corridor that smelled faintly of ozone and polished steel. My steps echoed. My heart didn't. The door opened. And there he was, Victor Harlan, older than I remembered, thinner, his hair gray at the temples, but his posture straight. Behind him, a wide window revealed a server hall bathed in cold light, the hum of machines pulsing like a second heartbeat. He turned slowly, a faint smile on his lips. "Elyra." I didn't sit. "Why now?" "Because you've become more than an heir," he said. "You've become a threat." He said it like a compliment. I held up the flash drive. "You were never after K2. You were after what came next. Lyra." His smile deepened. "And you brought it to me." My jaw tightened. "No, I brought it to end this." He stepped forward, just once, deliberate. Dorian thought fear could keep the future locked away. He was wrong. We live in an age of acceleration, Elyra, of control. Whoever shapes the next intelligence doesn't just build software, they shape civilization. "That's why you wanted it?" I asked. "To play God?" He raised a brow. "To correct imbalance, influence, power, call it what you will." I pulled a small device from my coat pocket. Jackson's remote server trigger. If I pressed the button, Lyra's data would upload to every major university AI department, open source and unalterable. His eyes flicked to it. "You'd share it freely? Let it be misused?" "No," I said quietly. "I'd let the world decide. That's what Dorian wanted. Not secrecy, not theft, transparency." His face hardened. "You've made your choice then." I nodded. "And you've lost." I pressed the trigger. Somewhere across the ocean, every data vault we mirrored lit up. Every corner of the network received a copy of Lyra, untampered, unbranded, and protected. Victor didn't flinch, but I saw it in his eyes, the flicker of something he rarely felt: powerlessness. "This isn't over," he said. I turned toward the door. "For you, maybe, but for the rest of us?" I looked back. "It's just beginning." The headlines broke before I landed back in the States. Dorian Kane's final project released worldwide. New open AI framework challenges corporate giants. 15B innovator disrupts industry with unclaimed patent drop. They didn't name Lyra after me in the articles. That was by design. It was never about credit. It was about truth. Taryn showed up at my door 2 days later. She didn't say much, just stood there with red-rimmed eyes and a folder in her hands. "Mom signed over everything," she said. "She's stepping away. I'm done being her proxy." She paused. "I'm sorry." I looked at her, not with hate, not even pity, just finally seeing her as she was, someone lost and trying to find something real. I took the folder. "So start over," I said. She nodded. Jackson and I sat in the courtyard of the new Foundation headquarters a week later, just a few blocks from the university where it all began. "Do you think it'll hold?" he asked. "The trust, the open source, the mission." I watched the wind move through the trees. "If it doesn't," I said, "then we try again. That's all legacy is, right? Trying until someone gets it right." He smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was living. We don't choose where we come from, but we do choose what we become. And when betrayal breaks us, we get to rebuild, not in their image, but in our own. That's the truth Dorian left behind, and the one I finally claimed for myself. If this story moved you, subscribe for more true-feeling thrillers about betrayal, justice, and transformation. Like, share, or comment your thoughts. And don't forget to watch the next story we're uploading this week. You won't want to miss it.